We're always driving to dance lessons. So we signed up for Know Your Drive. We save money and get closer to her dancing dreams.
The daring young man on the flying trapeze.
Or maybe her singing dreams. Sign up for Know Your Drive and save up to 20%. American Family Insurance. Insure carefully, dream fearlessly.
Products not available in every state. Discount terms apply. Visit amfam.com/knowyourdrive for details. American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operating company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
This morning, Jen woke up, made 3 breakfasts, did 2 loads of laundry, and 1 conference call. But she also saved $25 because Jen uses a new innovation from Huntington called Money Scout. It analyzes Jen's checking account to find money that's not being used and moves it to her savings automatically. Learn more and enroll at huntington.com/moneyscout. Huntington. Welcome. Message and data rates may apply to text alerts. Money Scout is subject to eligibility, terms and conditions, and other account agreements. Member FDIC.
All right, it's Film Study. We're back. It's the offensive episode for Week 17, closing out the regular season as we discuss that offensive play against the Bengals out in Cincinnati this weekend. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
I can't complain. Joining us today is Kyle Barber. He is the chief editor of Baltimore Beatdown, so I'm sure you've read different articles of his and seen his work around. Kyle, how are you doing?
Thrilled to be on the show. I'm doing pretty well right now. Things are looking up.
It's tough to complain when your team's in the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt.
Been a great run. Baltimore Beatdown, been around now for a long time, part of the SB Nation network, right?
Correct. Yes, we are the Baltimore Ravens website covering. We cover the Baltimore Ravens for SB Nation.
Okay. All right, great. And we've had Voss on the show a number of times, a very knowledgeable and good guy. And he's your assistant editor-in-chief, or how do you...
Yeah. The official title that is given is deputy editor. I see him as, just the number 2 guy. And anything that... I see him kind of like Jerry Rosburg was for John Harbaugh.
There you go.
When I interviewed Rosburg, I was like, what does alternate head coach or associate head coach mean? He said anything that Harbaugh doesn't do that lands on my desk is essentially it. And Voss is quite a pillar and cornerstone of Baltimore Beatdown, has been for a long time. I believe he was my first hire when I did receive the managing editor position for Baltimore Beatdown. So yeah, he's been great, and like you said, he's brilliant. And I'm happy he's been on this show for you guys.
Yeah, it's been very cool. He's definitely one of our go-to guys, and one of the first guys I call if we have a breakdown of some sort, and we need a guest in short order. So that's been great. Won very much by the 2019 formula in this last game. Got off to a lead, played dominating defense with a lead, all those things you like to see. And I'd be hard-pressed. I have one thing maybe, but I'd be really hard-pressed to pick anything out of this game that does not portend well for the playoffs.
Yeah, they were firing on all cylinders. The offense looked great. I know this is covering the offense, but the defense looked great too. Only allowed 3 points. I've made it known a few times now that I thought it was kind of a cowardly field goal to take. Zach Taylor celebrated 2 field goals against the Ravens in 2 matchups to avoid 2 shutouts, and that's the whole difference maker there between them scoring any points and a grand total of 6 in 2 matchups.
Yeah, that's certainly a 65-6, right? 27-3 to 38, so 65-6. That's pretty remarkable. The Ravens had a 75-0 run at home against the Bengals in a 3-year period from 99 to 01. So 3 straight shutouts. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, this was great. And at the same time, looking around the rest of the league and what's going on, we're hearing some of the news come out of Cleveland about a COVID outbreak there, and that potentially affecting their game. I take no real pleasure in the Browns being put down for this. In fact, I really would have wished the Browns would have been in a position to beat the Steelers, knock them out, give the Ravens a better chance for a home game next week, give the Ravens a chance for a home game next week. Still could happen. But I think what's most important about what we learned about the season is it's really not a fault thing. Like all of these things, the Ravens didn't engineer their own COVID outbreak, and all these other teams that have had problems since kind of painted that in a bold relief that let the Ravens kind of off the hook easy in terms of their penalty.
Yeah, they like you said, they most certainly did not engineer that. That wasn't planned. It wasn't structured, and they were impacted by a separate COVID outbreak by the Titans and Steelers matchup, which swapped their bye week with the Steelers so the season could go on as scheduled. So the Ravens were impacted multiple times through COVID, and their schedule had to operate around the pandemic and the outbreak that was occurring from them specifically, and then also from a different team. Certainly not thrilled that the Browns are going to have to lose what it sounds like to be their head coach and a couple other coaches as well, if I'm not mistaken. Overall, I was actually kind of happy and celebratory that the Browns made the playoffs. I truly enjoyed, the Monday, maybe the nationally televised game, what many called the game of the year, Ravens-Browns matchup. And, I think it's going to be more fun with the Browns in the playoffs. And I wish they were full strength, just as much as I wish maybe not just as much, but I'm certainly wishing that the Ravens were full strength right now without injury.
Yeah, they're getting there. And we're going to come back in a minute and talk about the offensive line, but Josh first.
All right, now's the chance to get onto MyBookie. Lots of excitement this weekend as you got NFL games on Saturday, Sunday, and then the championship college game on Monday night. Now's the time to head on over to MyBookie, and when you're over there, make your first deposit using the code RAVENS, and they'll match you halfway and give you the head start on building your bankroll. Put in $200 and get an extra $100 to play with. It's easy to deposit. It's easy to take out your money. So head on over to MyBookie and make some extra cash with some playoff football this weekend.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Looking back now at the offensive line scoring, this was a game where the Ravens racked up 404 rushing yards. Obviously, very close to the record. In fact, I was at a point when they were at 350 yards, I was actually a little surprised they were that high after the Dobbins 72-yard run. And I'm also kind of surprised they didn't get it, because it looked to me, particularly after the run by Hill for 16 yards, I think it was the second 16-yard run, about 3 plays, that they would probably get it. And then all of a sudden they didn't produce anything for the rest of the game.
A little disappointed they didn't get it. I wanted to have the Ravens hang their cap on it. I believe the official record was against the Baltimore Colts as well, so this would have been a gratifying thing that you went from being the team that accepted the most rushing yards to being the one delivering them. I also wanted it from the standpoint that, after the Bengals intercepted Lamar Jackson early in the game, they went to the end zone and took out the full end zone cam with the whole team posing, and then proceeded to allow over 400 rushing yards in a 38-3 blowout. And I wanted just the photo of that to only resemble that they then allowed the most rushing yards in NFL history in a single game. I was a little bummed they didn't get it.
Yep, a lot of fun stuff happening around this. Go over the overall offensive line play. For 73 scored snaps in this game, that's all of them offensively. The Ravens didn't have any kneels or spikes in this one. 0 sacks allowed. That's always good. There were 2 quarterback hits. One of them was all Jackson for holding the ball too long. The other one was 2/3 to the offensive line, 1/3 on a free run. Actually, 1/3 I think on Jackson holding the ball too long on that one as well, because he could have gotten rid of it. 0 pressures in 19 dropbacks. That's remarkable. And when you look under that, Lamar scrambled them out of 5. So they would have had 5 if Lamar had thrown passes on those plays, which means I had to make some adjustments to scoring to kind of reflect that. But the guy who was most affected by that was Zeus, who had lost his block on each of those 5 plays. And I always say this, there's losing your block and losing your block when you're blocking for Lamar Jackson, because if you remain engaged and intercede with that player, even if you run back into him, even if you're pushed back into him, you still give Jackson a chance to elude the pocket, work his magic, and maybe scramble for positive yardage.
You got to play to the whistle, and there's nothing like playing to the whistle when you got Lamar Jackson back there, who is one of the most dynamic athletes, maybe not just in football, but on the globe right now.
Yeah, exciting player, certainly reads leverage like no one we've ever seen in any sport, and remarkable there. Ample time and space on 6 of 19 dropbacks, that's 32%. Only 3 pressures out of 19 dropbacks against the Ravens. I remember one of those quarterback hits was holding the ball too long, so that was actually not a pressure, not within 3 seconds anyway, and 10 others where the ball was out quickly. No runs for loss. There were 4 penalties for 25 yards. Those were the major deduction from the offensive line in this game. And I'm sure with one particular lineman, people are not going to like my grade on him, but that's the way it goes. Team pulled. Now, this is remarkable. 54 running plays. First of all, that's remarkable. And we know that a fair number of those were scrambles, maybe 6 or 7. So 48 times, 39 successfully, the Ravens executed a pull in this game. That's approximately 1 per designed run, driven by a lot of these 2-man counter plays, a lot of left guard, left tackle going right, left guard or right guard, right tackle going left. And they also had some center left guard and some center left tackle and center right tackle movement as well.
Just the structure of the offense and the offensive line and the structure of the play designs to be able to move your tackles, your guards, and even the center so frequently and succeed so much, like you pointed out, is just a testament to I think Greg Roman kind of getting back to the 2019 roots of of their success. And it's been exciting to watch over these last 4 weeks. They've averaged over 260 rushing yards per game, and this was obviously the biggest one of them. And this is what happens when everything's working right, when everything is hitting, and you get a hat on a hat, like they all shout down there on the training camp field. Good things happen, and good things occurred in 400 rushing yards in this matchup.
Yeah, you talk about something that's like near and dear here, considering they're about to play the Titans again, because when they played the Titans last year in the playoffs, the Titans found a way to neutralize that outside read option out of the pistol, which almost always involved Gus Edwards or Ingram taking the straight ahead look and Jackson looking to beat somebody on the edge. Now, Jackson's had an injury that I'm not sure is still completely healed with his groin that has been limiting his lateral movement, and he hasn't been as good on the edge this year as he has been just going straight up the middle and eluding players, which requires, I think, less lateral movement. So they've been using, instead of the pistol, they've been using the sidecar, or the king and queen, people call it, but the sidecar, mostly to allow Dobbins to be the outside speed threat, while Lamar is a middle threat, and they'll often have a jet sweep going the other direction to have a third threat in there. And then they'll mix that up with these 2-man pulls. And by the way, that's one of the cool things about the Ravens offense is when they pull 2, you still have no idea where the ball is going, do you?
No, you have no idea. You just have 2 big blockers heading your way, and you got to make the read before Lamar Jackson commits another vanishing act, or J.K. Dobbins is burning through the sideline, or like you mentioned with the motion, with the jet sweep possibility, maybe somebody's Duvernay or Marquise Brown in some in some instances is already gone along the edge or outside or somewhere else.
It is a fun offense to work. It's very much an old-timey offense, but it does just give them 3 different options. It gives them a gap option and a power option and a speed option, and all on the same play, which I'm just loving. And this will be nothing that the Titans have prepared for. It'll be nothing about the way they beat the Ravens last year, which, frankly, a lot of that was the Ravens beating themselves with some 4th down mistakes and a couple turnovers. But this is, I think this is a Ravens team that should be well prepared, at least in terms of having an offense that can beat a Titans defense that has some legitimate flaws.
I would agree with that. Something that I'm curious about is this a fun thing to grade when you have so many, like you mentioned, there's so many threats available. Does it make it more difficult to grade, or is it more fun to grade when you get to see so many interesting and intricate details in this kind of an offense?
Okay, I really appreciate the question, first of all. So my wife and I do the grading together. Okay, so Maureen is terrific at handling the score sheet while I kind of handle the remote and call it out and whatnot. And it's something we've really enjoyed. So just from that perspective, it's a lot of fun. It takes us about 2.5 to 3 hours now for a game, and that's when now that we're a fairly well-oiled machine in terms of knowing exactly what we're looking for in every play and calling it out. But I will say this, run plays are more complicated to score in terms of the blocking, so it takes us a little longer to do that. So while this is a 54 run game is about as many as the Ravens have ever had. I can't remember them ever running more. They had 52 in the playoffs against New England the time they went up to New England and beat the crap out of them. The first time after the 2009 season. But I would say it's fun because it's a lot of having to read the play and figure it out, and then you notice things and you have to write down. And then the other part is fun too. All of the stuff about when Lamar Jackson is running out of a pressure. We note that as well, and we have scoring codes for that. So this season just because of who Roman is, it's a lot of fun to grade the offensive line, even if it takes a little longer than it had in the Flacco years.
So it's a yes to both. It is more intricate, but it's also more fun.
More intricate, more fun. I go along with that, Kyle. All right. So let's talk about left tackle here. Zeus had a fine game, I'd say, but he did benefit from Lamar Jackson's scramble. So he lost at the line of scrimmage on all 5 of the times that Lamar Jackson had an 8R on our score sheet where he ran out of a pressure. But he did not allow any pass rush events otherwise, which is really good. Now, some of those pressures he actually would have shared, so he wouldn't have ended up with 5 full pressures, but maybe 3 out of these 5 would have been a reasonable thing. He missed 9 blocks in total. 5 of those we've already accounted for, 4 others. He had a false start in the game. 5 of 8 pulls. Now, Orlando Brown's been pulling a lot lately, and most of those are selling a fake. So he doesn't actually have to make contact. But when he's been making contact, it's been a really effective either level 2 block, usually, or an edge block where he's forcing someone to the outside of that play. And I've really been enjoying watching him do what he can in terms of mobility, because when he's on the backside of a run play, it's much less likely that he can impact it.
Makes a lot of sense. That's something that I have not noticed enough, is that Orlando Brown Jr. is pulling on the plays. I know we're going to get to him, but Bozeman's been the guy that I watch all the time, and he's going to second levels. He's sprinting across the formations. He's getting, as soon as the snap going, I'm watching where he's going a lot of the time just because it's fun to watch him, and I root for him. He's been on our podcast. We had an interview with him, which was fun, and and I root for the guy. He's up for the Walter Payton Man of the Year. He's done some great stuff off the field for the city of Baltimore, and he's got a great foundation, the Nicky and Bradley Foundation, I believe is what it's called. He's just been an excellent guy, and I've been rooting for him just to succeed, and it's been so much fun to watch that happen. And but going back to Brown, as you mentioned, I haven't noticed enough on him, particularly other than, I don't get to see this through the same set of eyes that you do and the same analysis that you do, but it's really fun to see him just grow and thrive as a left tackle, because, we all thought he would be up to the task, but how great of it would he become? And from what I've seen, he's looked pretty solid, filling in for Ronnie Stanley, and it's going to be interesting when contract talks happen where he's going to land as far as left tackle money versus right tackle money, because there is a difference in those numbers.
Yeah, there's a difference in those numbers, and it might end up pricing him out of Baltimore. There's another team that's going to be more desperate at left tackle than the Ravens are, not with Stanley, and they may be the team that he ends up going. I hope he can stay and play right tackle with the Ravens. I just think it becomes less likely with every fine game that he's had.
Completely agree.
All right. So a B in the game was how I graded it out, but if I didn't have a bottom on subjective adjustments, I don't allow them to be negative. I probably would have graded him a C or a C minus based on this game. But very solid game still, frankly, and nothing wrong with getting a C when you're out of position, or even when you're in position and you're playing some solid games. There's a lot of variation in game to game grading. Let's move on to Bozeman here. You mentioned him already. I thought he played very well. He avoided any pass blocking charges or penalties in this game. 7 missed blocks. Here's the big number. 17 of 21 pulls. Now, I have to go back. I thought I remembered James Hurst in 2017 having 23 in a game, or perhaps a combination of 2 different left guards having 23 in a game. But this is very close to the record. For a long time, it was 19 by Yanda in that game, at that playoff wildcard game at New England, where they ended up running the ball 52 times. But anyway, he had a remarkable game here. The 17 of 21 pulls is really an excellent rate. It doesn't necessarily seem it, because he missed the most pulls of any Raven in this game too. But an 80% rate on blocks where he has to kind of move and make them in space, make choices, that's a hard thing to do. And it really deserves to be properly appreciated.
Yeah, like you said, he had the most pulls and the most blocks, and he had the most missed ones. And this is where the argument that everybody loves to sometimes forget when they're going through data analysis and utilization of data for an argument is sample size matters.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, he had the most of these pulls, he had the most of these blocks, and yes, he missed the most, but like you mentioned, it deserves to be appreciated. That's a lot of movement, and that's a lot of just stamina that you're asking to be required by a big offensive lineman. Somebody that has to get out ahead and has to, get across the formation or pull into a direction that he has to also then, come into contact with another big defender and try and combat that enough to open up a lane or fake selling, opening up a lane, what so have you. And like you mentioned, I greatly appreciate the work that Bozeman has done over the course of this entire season. And, when he's doing stuff like this, 21 pulls, that's a lot to ask of any offensive lineman. And he's doing it at a rate of what you have here at 80%. That's fantastic to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. Now, here's the other thing. He made 6 blocks in level 2. The Ravens as an offense in this game, just the 7 offensive linemen who played, made 50 blocks in level 2. So 48 pulls and 50 blocks in level 2. That's just out of this world number. I go across the line. I'm just going to read them off to you right now. Orlando Brown, something that I've heard Vinny say on air that Orlando Brown is useless in level 2. 11 blocks in level 2 in this game. Bozeman 6, TCC 9. We had Powers with 10. This is another amazing one. Fluker was 6, and he only played 32 snaps. 5 more for Phillips, who shared the right tackle position, and 3 for Bredesen in just 17 snaps. So a remarkable game of getting into level 2. And I think part of that might have been the fact that the Bengals, for at least the second half and probably part of the first half, were very disinterested in playing this football game. There wasn't really anybody in that front 7 who was giving a particularly good effort through contact. And what I mean by that is when they were blocked, they just wanted to engage with the block and brother-in-law it instead of really trying to get off the block in the way they normally were. And the guy who was most guilty of it is the big talker, Jermaine Pratt, who had come out before the game and said all sorts of stuff.
I'm thrilled that this is what you mentioned for many things. One, I like that you called out that that Orlando Brown has been doing the job at the second level when somebody else has said that he hasn't been doing it. You got the data to back that up. I respect that, Ken. Nicely done. Jermaine Pratt, and the amount of talk that he did on Twitter, and then for him to be the victim of J.K. Dobbins' stiff arm as he sprinted off to that 72-yard rushing touchdown. Happy that he's being called out there as well. And I respect J.K. Dobbins' response, and I think this is kind of what you were mentioning, is that they'll let them do the talking. The Ravens are just going to go out there and play ball, is what he said. And what you mentioned is that they were just interested in getting engaged in the blocks, and I like the term brother-in-lawing it, and just kind of dealing with the block and letting the play develop, so much as instead of combating it, challenging it, and working through it. They were just there so they couldn't get fined, is what it felt like. And those are some great points, Ken.
Yeah, finish the season, not get injured. And I understand nobody wants to get injured, A, going into a contract, B, even if you're still staying on the same team, because your team might not want you next year. If you're not ready to play in OTAs and somehow puts you at a competitive disadvantage in a position, nobody wants that. And hey, if you're going on vacation, who wants to get sick right before vacation? You understand that, certainly. So if you're a football player, you don't want to get hurt when you're planning a trip to wherever
yeah, of course.
to spend your time. So anyway, understood and still not really respected in terms of how they played this football game. A for Bozeman on the game in this one. I'll move on to TCC, who replaced McCary in this game. Were you a little surprised by that, Kyle, in terms of TCC over Skura?
I don't think so. The Skura snaps failures, and from what I've seen from him, I do my winners, losers, MVP articles, and Skura has found himself on more losers than winners articles on Baltimore Beatdown. I think they really want to see what they got with TCC. He had a decent start from what I remember a few games back, where he performed well when called upon. I don't have your grading in front of me, but I think he did decent, and I kind of wanted to see what he'd perform with too, especially against the Bengals. Yes, it's a win and in situation, but this is kind of a good game, Week 17. The Bengals aren't coming out there for anything but pride, and clearly they didn't have a whole lot of it. And so you gotta evaluate what you got there, and you can move forward, maybe heading into the new year or the new season with a little bit more film on TCC before the next set of training camp, before OTAs, to evaluate what you want to do with that position heading into free agency and the draft as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really hadn't even thought of that, honestly, because Skura, I think they know what they have for next year. This year, TCC, I think he gave them one more thing than Skura in this game, which was he gave them a lower variance performance. Meaning Skura, if he'd had a bad performance, it could have been snaps all over the place, and they could have rectified that situation. The first bad snap, you can pull Skura and put TCC at, but they also know what they have in Skura as a player. I think they like it, but he's not the guy they want in terms of taking snap risk against a bad team, where literally that's the only way you're going to get beat by the Cincinnati Bengals is if you have a couple of snaps go way off target and it creates a couple big negative plays or a turnover.
Yeah, that's what was mentioned with, when Harbaugh was saying not to stick that ball out there across the line against J.K. Dobbins. This is it. That's the only way they're going to beat us. I'd rather you get down and you can run another play, and that's it. You don't want to put a danger of Skura maybe having a bad snap. Like I like when he has a bad game, the variance there it could be far more significant than it could be with Tristan Cole and Castillo, and you want to evaluate him and you want to mitigate risk in a control your destiny, head to the postseason football game.
Yep. Exactly right. And going to the other point you made, which is that they wanted to learn what they have with Tristan Colon Castillo. I love that. I love the idea of giving some of your backups a little bit of time to play. It could have been in the second half, but in this case, the other component made it worth it being the start. But they have so many decisions to make on that offensive line for next year. They really need to start gathering data when they can. They need to know about Colon Castillo, but he's not the only candidate at center next year. If they had to, they could move Bozeman, but the only time they can really move Bozeman is during the offseason. I frankly think it's a dumb idea right now. I think they want to keep him at left guard. He's the pulling machine, and there's no need to take a chance on another player not being that. I think he's doing exactly what's needed.
Yeah, I agree with that. The pulling machine, Bradley, the pulling machine, Bozeman makes most sense. I don't see his need for him to move back to center where he was at Alabama. He's been, he's found his role with the Baltimore Ravens as the left guard. You can evaluate what you have at TCC. You can see if he's performing better, worse, or at the same level as Makari. You got to head into the draft. Maybe this is a position that they want to bolster with a mid-round pick or something, maybe even high if they find somebody at the right price, right value, and just getting ahead of this instead of waiting until we should have maybe had him in the game against the Bengals to evaluate that. Now we got to wait all the way until OTAs before we get some true game film on him, and even OTAs isn't true game film. Now you can see him against an NFL opponent with a start, so he knows that he's got to go in here and perform at the expectation that he knows could be maybe his last snaps as a Raven if he can't perform to the expectation.
Yeah, fair enough. And if you think about back to last year in Week 17, the guy they started was Ben Powers, and it did not mean, unfortunately, that Ben Powers got the starting job to start the 2020 regular season because they had other options, and they really had to work through those as well. They never really gave Fluker a chance at right guard. They did give one to Phillips. They gave one to Powers eventually, and they gave one to McCary. I'm trying to think if anybody else has played right guard during this season for the Ravens. At least those three have. Anyway, they had young players that they needed to work through, which was more important than giving a player like Fluker a chance, where you're an older player, you don't have an option on his future in the same way you have an option for 3 more years on Phillips and 2 more years on McCary and 2 more years on Powers, where that has a lot of value. So you really want to find out what your young players have as quickly as possible and hopefully make use of that.
Completely agree.
All right, so let's see. A TCC, a B overall. He had another, what do they call it, a missed snap or snap infraction, false start, they called it. But anyway, only a third of a quarterback hit. That was his only negative event. He did get run out of one pressure by Lamar. Really good game for TCC. Frankly, much better than his first game by about 2 grade levels. And I'm encouraged by that tremendously. And I thought that there's just a lot to like in there. 9 blocks in level 2. In this game for him, 4 out of 4 on pulls. So the mobility numbers really good. And I don't think there's been as much question about him as a power player as there had been as him as a mobility player. So it's nice to see that. And I do have to honestly discount some of it for it being this game, but I'm still impressed that he's moving around and finding a block.
All right, yeah. This is about Powers, correct?
And that was still TCC. I'm moving on to Powers here.
I was just wanting to make sure. I was like, I don't know if we've gotten ahead or.
You want to start
or
on Powers?
Yeah, sure. Let's go on it. Oh, okay. I mean, from what I've seen with Powers, I'm pretty excited about what I've seen from him. He's progressed really well. I thought he was going to come in and immediately have a job. Especially with his interview being, I look to steal a man's soul from his body. I mean, good grief! You want to talk about a personality that you want as a Baltimore Raven? That's the guy you want. I mean, that's what we know from the Billick years of having a big personalities, tough guys, some dogs in the house, and I was really excited about that. So. I'm thrilled with his performance. I thought he played well, and overall, as we mentioned, you want to evaluate these young players as fast as you can because you want to know what you have. That's what we were talking about with TCC. This is another guy that you got some more film on him heading into the off season. Hopefully not for a few more weeks, but. Now you have a little bit more content to go through and some more data to pull. And overall, I've been up on Powers and his play this year.
Okay, so fantastic game here. He had one portion of a pressure that Lamar ran him out of, but he had 2 missed blocks only, 10 blocks in level 2, 6 out of 6 on pulls. A for this game. He's now got 6 straight games without a penalty. Now, there's something I want to talk to you about this because I know we have this as a common experience, but he is a player who had problems with penalties, had two penalty games earlier this year, but now 6 straight games without one. The guy I always associate with ironing out penalties in young players is Dallas Joe D, Coach D. I know we've been together at camp and seen this guy coaching the offensive line, and they just do it in these small 10-minute increments. So I think you get 15 or 16 of these per practice session. And Jody will have these guys, and even though he only has 10 minutes, he does these very individualized drills where he'll set up a 3-on-2, and it takes longer to set up, it seems like, than it could possibly be worth it, and you're not ramming through reps. But he's so individualized in the way he does the reps that he comes over, he talks to each player after the play and goes, do this. Tell us your thoughts of Jody, because I want to get back to one particular point.
I really love Coach D. He's really fun to watch. He's the most technically sound person as a coach, I think, when we're out there. Like you mentioned, he's very individual in coaching every single one of his players, and it's really stark to realize what the difference is between a fan or even a media representative, somebody that studies film like we do, and then what he does as a coach. He can see any and all failures or successes in each movement of a positioning of a player's arm, their wrist, their finger length, their distance between the fingers, where their feet are placed, the millimeters in difference that he can notice is something that I don't think in any part of my life I've been so technically sound and keen on finding the successes and failures in the technicalities and in the details like Coach D. Coach D is all in the details. That's what the D in Coach Sandra stands for, is what I'm at. But I would love to hear the story that you're going with.
I just this is for Orlando Brown's rookie year. So he was in there at right tackle, and they had him set up in one of these 3-on-2 things because even though they only have 1 rep at a time to do, they're still only doing a 3-on-2 for one side of the line from center to guard, center to tackle over there, and he was there, and it's a pass blocking drill, and he kind of put his hands up, and he goes, and he tells everybody, don't slap at him, you know what's happening, and Orlando Brown just turned to him and goes, what was I doing? And he goes, you're slapping at him, and what I always hear about when I hear that voice and when I hear that thing in my mind is the voice of the penguin coming through and talking to Orlando Brown and telling him that. But he's tremendously astute. You mentioned some of the things, but he'll show you exactly how to move your feet and whatnot. But it's very much like you take one step and then you punch. You don't do this, you don't do that. And he's very specific, and he gets into each player's thing. There's also a little bit of a Hollywood director in him that after this rep goes, he goes, perfect, let's do it again. So this thing is, you just love that. So let's get one more take here. Yeah. So I've always enjoyed watching.
I've never attributed that thing until you said it, and then I go, "Oh my gosh, that's what the reference is." I've never been keen to this before. That's completely true. That's how he sounds, and that's exactly who it is. Oh, that's absolute gold, Ken. Whew.
So anyway, real fun things. And if you ever get to go to camp, make sure you look at those offensive line drills. They're very fun to watch, and the players that are involved in that obviously are very good about dealing with that. I think a lot of the outstanding footwork that Matt Skura has had, and the Ravens have had very few problems with centers blowing up pulls, which often is a problem for other teams, and was a problem, frankly, during the Matt Flynn era with the Ravens, because footwork was bad, and he would step on the quarterback's foot, or he would step on the guard's foot, or he would do other things, the wrong thing with his foot. Well, Dallas Sanders has coached that out of the players. So in addition to the penalties, we're seeing a lot of the benefits from that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Somebody that was really looked at as a high upside player was Greg Senat, I think, for many years, and that was because his footwork was great, because he was, a basketball talent as well. And I didn't have as much of a upside look on him, because I went, Coach Dallas Sanders can coach footwork into anybody. He can get anybody to get into the right position, and he can get them to move around at the just like anybody, and he can do it with the bigger players, the smaller players. He can coach footwork just about into anybody, and that's why I wasn't so exuberant on Senat back then. Is because I was like, Coach, Dallas Sanders is going to be able to take care of that on somebody that's bigger, more talented in the blocking schemes than Senat was.
Yeah, Senat was a raw guy and obviously a small school guy, but I think part of the reason they took him was they knew that whatever was raw about him fundamentally could be coached up too from Dallas Sanders. So that gives the Ravens a lot of ability to go for a mid-round guy where they may be more like his tools than another team would, and they've been outstanding at finding guys there that are good.
They've just across the board they've been able to land these talents, and TCC is yet another one of those an undrafted guy that's come in, and they coached them up. Bradley Bozeman, 6th-round pick, they've coached them up. This team has really been able to churn out offensive line talent, to the degree that they've always been heralded for producing linebacker talent
defensive line talent. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
All right, let's go on here. We got to kind of pick up the pace a little bit here. But DJ Fluker, very good power game that was wasted by penalties, and this is just the way it is. 32 snaps, he missed 5 blocks, but had no pressure events allowed. He didn't even have anybody run out of a pressure. Lamar didn't help him by running out of a pressure, but he had an offensive hold and an illegal man downfield penalty. Those are both extra bad penalties. For a reason I'll explain in a second, is because they create an option for the offense. So for the defense, that an offensive hold penalty, you think of it as being 10 yards. Well, it's not exactly 10 yards. It's 10 yards and no loss of down at the best. At the worst, it could be a sack. It could be, a incomplete pass on 3rd down to end a drive that you ignore the penalty and you decline it. So you got to be, those penalties are actually more serious than a penalty of equal distance. So an illegal downfield pass, 5-yard penalty for being illegally downfield. It's the same as a false start, except it's not the same as a false start, because a false start is pre-snap and you can't decline it. So the advantage of that free play is of high value. So Fluker, in both these cases, these penalties, I'm going to go into some of the math in the article, about why I think the grade is fair here. But he had a very good power game otherwise. He had 6 level 2 blocks, 4 pancakes led the team, 5 out of 5 on pulls. And that's DJ Fluker, folks. DJ Fluker making 5 out of 5 pulls. Do we ever think we'd see that at right tackle, given the way, he kind of lumbers and moves the way he does? But he really got around well in this game. The grade, unfortunately, is only a high F after I make the deductions for the penalties. If you went before the penalties, he'd be a low B otherwise. So that
sounds about right. Yeah, it sounds about right. Those penalties are killers. They stall drives, they end drives, and that's his, I believe, 6th offensive holding penalty this season.
Oh, is it? Wow.
One of them was declined, so technically 5 if that's the route you want to go. But overall, he's a very up and down player. And nothing describes that more than what you said. He had 4 pancakes. He hit 5 of 5 on these pulls, but also struggled to. With these penalties, and he's struggled all season throughout. And overall, high upside player, but also low floor player at the same time. And he's a veteran. You want him to be more consistent. He's been in the league for so many years. You'd hope he'd have more consistency, but the inconsistencies in play are what is the most consistent with him.
Yeah, he's been playing now 10 weeks at tackle. So since week 8, he's been at right tackle. And his earlier play, he played 22 snaps at left tackle in the opener, 53 against Washington at right tackle. But since week 8, he's been in there for at least some part of the game at right tackle. And he's really only had an aggregate of 2 bad games. And this wasn't even a fall off the charts F. It was a high F, which is a big difference because you can really fall off the charts as he has once. But he had a bad game against New England. And that was really a bad half. He had a bad game against Pittsburgh, which was, again, another just a little more than a half. And against Cincinnati now, he's had another bad half. It's really been 2 full games, if you aggregate all that together, that he hasn't played well. And all his other stuff is a C or better with 3 A's and 3 B's worked in there. So I've been very pleasantly surprised by how well he's been able to hold up at right tackle, given what how much the Ravens need that position to work and how thin I thought they were with only Stanley and Brown at the start of the year.
Yeah, Fluker has filled in rather well. I think you hope for better things just because I believe he was a first-round pick, and he's well regarded in being just a big mauler kind of guy, and you do need the right tackle position to work in the Ravens offense, with them being such a run-centric focus. That was what their success was in 2019, was the combination of Marshall Yonda, an absolute dominant right guard, with a young, budding Orlando Brown Jr. So you hope Fluker's run blocking is successful in that regard as well.
Okay, so now you're the GM of the Ravens now. Do you bring Fluker back for next year?
Well, that's a tough question. Was also not truly expecting that. But yeah, that's a pretty solid question. I think you have to, with Stanley returning off of off an ankle injury. You worry about his mobility, and you want to give him the full time it takes to heal, and you want to work him into the reps that he can get. And with Orlando Brown Jr. performing well at left tackle, that allows you to try and work in other people at right tackle, and Fluker can be a part of that competition, at worst a part of the 90-man roster.
Yeah, so they could at least have him for camp, and then not hopefully give him too much guaranteed money that they can just ask him to go. But yep. I think a player like him, with the season he's had, and he's had over 500 snaps and played pretty well, there's enough tape out there that somebody probably will want him. It won't be a huge deal, but somebody's going to want him as an important backup piece. And I'm not sure the Ravens need him the most of any of the teams. Just there's not too much aggregate dollars to spend in the whole league with the COVID cap coming up. And I think the Ravens are one of the teams that it would make a lot of sense for him to return to. And sometimes a ball player, even for a few $100,000, is not going to want to move again and deal with all that crap. So if he likes the situation here, maybe he'd stay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The Ravens are always heralded as a first-class organization. They're great with their players, and people have come here, come to Baltimore to play for less. And I really like the point that, man, moving is not fun. And players, when they've made the money they've made, $100,000, or packing all your stuff and traveling with your family or what so have you all the way across the country or to a different location to move and sell your house, buy a new place, they don't want to deal with that. And the money difference can sometimes be enough to sway them back to a team for a lesser cost.
There you go. All right, we'll go real quickly here with Tyree Phillips, 41 scored snaps. He got a B for the game. I don't have a lot to say about his game, so I won't. Bredesen, the interesting thing here was he got all of the 6th offensive line snaps, made 14 of 17 blocks, did actually play pretty well, 3 blocks in level 2, a pancake. He had a highlight. I'll go into that more in the article for people who really want to know what Ben Bredesen did. But it's maybe a little surprising that Matt Skura was not the 6th offensive lineman in this game, especially considering Harbaugh had been doing something he's only done for a few players. Carr is one other I remember, where he was continuing Skura's start streak by having him play as a 6th offensive lineman on the first play of the game.
Yeah, that's a little bit peculiar. That the Ravens are really good about doing stuff like that to keep things going. And Carr was definitely the guy that I thought of when you mentioned the snap streak before. Overall, I think the Bredesen being utilized as that 6th offensive lineman is a testament to the earlier conversation that they all want to see what these young guys are capable of, and they want to be able to evaluate them as soon as possible and get a head start instead of sit back on it.
Yeah, it's another good point. I really do want to see some snaps from Bredesen. I think Bredesen has had so little inline play, and I don't know whether he's played a series or two at guard or what he might have done so far. I'd have to really look back. But they really need him be playing more in the middle five, not as an eligible receiver, not as a tight end who's reporting on these plays. I don't feel like they've had that yet, and they probably won't get that until next preseason when they finally have him get some live fire in games.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I don't see them swapping him in anytime soon.
Yeah. Let's talk Lamar. So I have a lot of similar comments about Lamar from week to week, but there's a few different things about this game. One of the things I loved, and I'm going to start with this one, I think, is that the Bengals had rushed 3 or 4 for the entire game for the first 25 minutes and at 25 and a half minutes. Then they faced 3rd and 8. The Ravens had 3rd and 8 at the 18-yard line, Q2 431, if you want to go back and take a look at that play. All of a sudden, the Bengals sent their first real pressure, a 7-0 blitz, meaning they sent 7 in total, and Jackson immediately beat it with the 18-yard touchdown to Brown.
I mean, Jackson, this reminds me of something Harbaugh, I believe, said a long time ago, that like we didn't have the weapons to blitz this particular team. I think he was talking about the New England Patriots. He's like, we didn't have the talent to blitz the New England Patriots. We just didn't have the guys there to get home, and we knew that the coverage wasn't going to be able to last. And they were beating us. We were running zone. They were cutting us up. We were trying to play man. We were trying to play it safe. And finally we go, you know what? We got to send the blitz. And we send the blitz, and instantly what happens? 44-yard touchdown happens on us. And this is the exact same story. Is the Bengals couldn't compete, and they had to try and play it safe, and that wasn't working either. So you know what? We got to do something to combat this. We got to try and get home. And instantly, this is what Lamar does: is he hits his man for the touchdown.
Yeah, really extremely well-blocked play, but Jackson had to deal with a free runner and immediately got the ball out. The read was hot. It was a man read on Brown against I think the safety, but it might have been a corner. But anyway, it was a man read, and he threw the ball where only Brown could get it, and he did. A wonderful, wonderful throw there. The Ravens, I thought, made it very easy for the offensive line. We've talked about that a number of times. They're running out of pressure. Being what it is, but also just the freezing of the edge defender, the additional time it's allowed for double teams to develop was never felt more than in this game. And obviously the Bengals did their part to improve that situation by not really wanting to engage with their blocks too actively and allowing those double teams to be very effective and the move ups to level 2 to be very effective in fueling that run game.
I mean, Jackson's the most dynamic athlete on that field. Anytime he's on the field, he's the most dynamic athlete. And any edge defender can't make the misread, and so they're trying to do the right thing, but to do so, they're taking pause in that, and they're freezing that edge defender, like you said, and that only gives more of an advantage to Jackson because he already has the step. If you're giving him time, he gets to execute, and you don't get to react against Lamar Jackson. You have to take your action, and you gotta sometimes just hope that you've made the right call.
Yeah, I've been. It's been a pleasure to watch him play these last 5 weeks, and I know the defenses he's faced have not been great, but the formula is really working in terms of he's not throwing a whole lot of passes. When he does, I don't know that it's really a surprise, but the team always has to be prepared for the run more, and so play action is working, and him getting the ball out of his hands quickly is working, and him scrambling is working when other things don't work. About the coverage can't hold up forever. He's controlling the pocket in a way that we don't normally see in terms of he moves around the pocket in and out of it very naturally. We saw that probably more than any on that 44-yard touchdown pass against Cleveland when he came in and saved the day on 4th and 5. But, that was a 6-man blitz. The Ravens had it blocked up with 5 guys. You'd have thought that was, a 4-man rush, the way he just easily rolled out of the pocket to the right, had all the time in the world, gravitationally pulled 2 defenders that weren't blitzing towards him, and then easily hit Brown for the score.
He's just a fluid mover, and he does it with such speed that it's bewildering at times, is the word that I tend to continuously use about him. He's been throwing the ball excellent. He's played he's played to the moment, and I think that really started with that Browns game. To dial it back a couple games, is just, he was called upon in a big moment and he answered, and then when the Browns went back and scored, he did it again. He drove the team down the field, and he's executing well, and he's continued to do that. He's thrown 9 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. He's rushed for another 3. He's at over 1,000 combined yards passing, rushing, and he's just, like you mentioned, over these last few games has been just dazzling to watch.
Now, in this 5-game stretch, they've had 4 games where they've destroyed the opponent and led by so much that it was never a case of Jackson coming back. And then they had the Browns game where they blew a big lead while he was having his bathroom break. And then he came back, threw the touchdown, put him back ahead. As you mentioned, the Browns really moved right down the field and scored too quickly, frankly, gave Jackson time. And then he completed all 5 of his passes after returning to the field, had just had one spike in there that obviously doesn't count, right before the field goal. And I think it just answers every question about, is Lamar Jackson a quarterback who can bring you back? He hasn't been brought anybody back from 21, but those kind of comebacks are so rare for any quarterback. I don't think you can point to them. Coming up with the clutch play when he needed the clutch play is something now Lamar Jackson has done enough in his career to go with all of the unmitigated pedal to the metal destructions he's done of other teams.
Yeah, I like that. My other argument against the whole, he doesn't have the talent to come back. It's not his fault. Him and his team are scoring so much that they don't have to deal with coming back, because they were posting in 2019 40 burgers on, just about everybody in the league. And they had a 12-game win streak, I believe. Mm-hmm. And this year, he's gone out there. Like, it's not his fault that he doesn't have to deal with comebacks, because his team, for the most part, is either in every game by a single score, and most times they're, leading their opponent by 10 plus in events.
Yeah, so it's one of a good article I read on the topic. It said that talked about quarterbacks generating comebacks that were of their own design, meaning they'd created the problems that got them into this hole in the start, and then they were able to get themselves out of it. And it's one of the really silly things about looking at quarterbacks just from a comeback perspective. When you get down to that, you really are talking about the Ravens being the number 1 team in terms of point differential. I don't think is recognized enough in terms of just how powerful this team is going into the playoffs. And they'll be going into a year where the home advantage should not be particularly significant.
Oh, absolutely not. I don't. There's a fine line between whoever has to, not this week but next week, go to Kansas City and play in Arrowhead Stadium with and without the roaring of fans. And the same goes for the Ravens heading to Tennessee. They don't have to deal with a packed stadium that celebrates and roars every time Derrick Henry gets the football, be it a positive or negative gain, just because they get to watch that guy run across the field or any significant plays. I am of the mind that I think momentum is a thing in games. I know it's widely disputed. I don't know where you fall on that, but I'm a guy that thinks momentum is real. I felt it when I was playing sports in my younger years, but and not having to deal with the possibility of momentum swinging so heavily against their opponents is going to be pretty sweet when it comes to the road games that the Ravens will have to deal with. Hopefully they end up with a home, though.
All right, very cool. It would be cool if they played a home game, either the AFC Championship or even next week. It'd be great if they got to play. Who would it be? I guess it would be the Browns, right? Because Indianapolis is Let's talk scheme. So anything you'd like to add on this? I'll let you think about it for a second. I'll bring up a item first. We talked about a little bit about the Bengals have no desire to play this game, so I don't need to bring up that again. They won the snap count 73-40. Not exactly a scheme thing, but I will say this, that good defense feeds off good offense. Your good defense benefits from the time of possession necessary to keep their own snap count down. So you win the game. You wear the other team out on defense by running a lot of offensive snaps by number. But you keep your own defense protected from high snap counts by running a lot of time off the clock. So they're both important, time of possession and snap count. But I thought the defense tremendously benefited from that in this game. And they only had 40 defensive snaps, which was the fewest in team history with two other times that's occurred previously.
I thought that was a really great point, is that, when on broadcast, they're like, man, the Ravens have been down on this drive for 14 minutes. It's like, well, they've only ran maybe 8 or 9 plays. But when they get into it, they get deep in the numbers on grinding down a run because, oh man, they get another third down conversion. They get another third down conversion. It's a 4th and 1, and they grind through that one, and they get the first. That's what I feel wears down that's what you said, is it's about wearing down your opponent and keeping your guy fresh. And both of those are necessary in the equation. That running more snaps means they have to work more, not that they're just on the field more, because when you're moseying about on an 8-play drive, that's not as exhaustive as a 14-play drive that's marched the field down and has also worn out the opponent for 14 minutes while you've kept the other opponent fresh. And that's a really significant scheme notice that I really liked about that.
Yeah, so definitely it's been the formula for the 19 and 20 Ravens. It's good to see them be able to continue it now. Hopefully they can take it into the postseason. They're facing a not very great Tennessee defense, and there honestly is no reason why they have to feel the primetime jitters. It won't actually be in primetime. It'll be Sunday at 1 p.m., but I don't know if that'll help. But they don't need to feel the jitters this time. I don't believe they're facing a defense that just is frankly not very good, very similar to the last 4 defenses or 5 defenses they've faced. And they're perfectly capable of rolling right over this defense in the same way.
I think the only notable things to fear with this defense are the playmakers on that defense. Kevin Byard is capable of running stride for stride with Mark Andrews and maybe even canceling him out of the game, because that is one talented safety. They have a solid cornerback duo, I believe, there in Tennessee. But something that I think is excitable that the Ravens need to take advantage of is the third down defense of the Titans has been very weak, and something that I mentioned on our show for Baltimore Beatdown was this team has only 19 sacks on defense. The Titans have only sacked the quarterback 19 times. That's incredibly low, and for people that complain so much about the Ravens defense not getting enough sacks on the quarterbacks, they had, I believe, 39 this year. So cut that in half, and that's what the Titans' production level is on sacks. So that's something that they should really take advantage of. And the tackles and the entire offensive line as a whole, and also Lamar Jackson, need to be just cognizant of that they aren't that great at this particular play or this particular part of defense, and exploiting it is what they truly need to do.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that the Ravens get to third down, and it's often 2-down territory, certainly if they're on the other side of the 50, sometimes if they're only even on their own side of the 50. Yeah. And it's definitely an opportunity. And it's very demoralizing to constantly not be able to get off the field. It's you just feel like every set of downs, there's so much riding on first down in terms of making a play to either get them stuck for no gain, maybe get them to throw an incomplete pass or tackle them for a small loss or no gain. It's the only way you're ever going to get the other team off the field. And I think we even saw some of that against the Bengals, in that they were declining 5-yard penalties on first down when the Ravens got a 2-yard gain on a play. That was very odd.
Yeah, I think this is something is just that's a part of my momentum belief, is that, man, when it's 3rd and 2 and the Ravens lean forward and they get the third, or it's 3rd and 9 and all of a sudden Marquise Brown gets his second catch of the game, and of course it moves the chains, and it's demoralizing, and that's a big factor in games is attitude, and it can truly sway a game. And I like to think of it from the fact, look at it negatively as a Ravens fan and going, oh, the Ravens need to get the ball back, like in the last, face-off, the last matchup, against the Tennessee Titans. They got to get off the field. They got to get this defense off the field. They got to stop Henry. You just got 3 plays. You got to stop him. So the Ravens getting back on offense, and hopefully they can get the ball moving again, get some points on the board. And it's just not happening. Mm-hmm. And it's not happening. You watch the ticker go down as it goes through, and it's excruciating as a fan, and I assume player.
The Ravens played a little more pony backfield in this game. There were 3 snaps by my count. I could be wrong on that, but I also take total running back snaps, subtract out total snaps, and I get to 3 also. It's interesting that they keep doing this week after week, but I think it is a function of not having tight ends. I think actually if there were tight ends available, this would not be something Roman would be doing, but it does provide them an extra way to attack. And I think, having the read option from last year, the power read was giving them two options in terms of a play up the middle and a run. They were not using it ever as a true triple option where they might have thrown a pass out of it. But this year they do have sort of a triple option when they have an option with motion, an option with a straight ahead run, and an option with a run to the outside in the other direction. So they've been doing a great job with that. I think Roman is probably next year when he has additional tight ends, and I assume that's the case, will probably stick with more, or occasionally at least, using this pony backfield.
I don't know that for certain, because if they're getting Nick Boyle back, they just love him far too much to keep him on the sidelines, especially with how much he's being paid. But I do agree with you that this is likely due to fewer tight ends available on game day.
51 snaps for Ricard in this game. Now, that's a career high for him. He had not had any games. And, it hasn't been atypical when they've had their regular set of tight ends that Ricard's been 15, 16, 17 snaps. We commented once earlier this year when he had, I think it might have been 22, 23, 24, and it was more than any running back. And that was a big deal. 51 snaps in this game. So he's an enormous part of an offense, obviously, whenever they want to run the football.
Yeah, they really do like him. I think sometimes they're trying to utilize him far too much. But in a game where the run game is absolutely dominating and you're able to produce what they did in the end, 400 rushing yards, he's going to be a proponent of that. And his talents are, especially with the lack of blocking tight ends on the roster, this is a guy that you got to look to just because of the possibility of him threatening anything other than being a blocker, being an option in the receiving game. You got to account for him.
All right. We've talked about most of the players now on the offense, but is there a player you'd like to talk about from a just an individual performance basis that you'd like to discuss? We usually alternate at this point.
I think Miles Boykin is a guy that I've been really curious about. He's doing this thing where he's on the field and he gets one reception. He gets either one or two targets a game, and he's alternating weeks, I believe, for the last 4 or 5 even at this point, that he's just catching a touchdown pass, and then he's not noticed in the receiving game for the rest of it. I believe his blocking ability has been really significant in helping move into the second level on some blocks or getting around the edge. He's that big-bodied receiver. I've enjoyed what I've seen from him, and from a standpoint of, as soon as they signed Des Bryant, that was the big warning flag for Boykin, that he needed to step up and begin making the plays necessary to stay on this roster long term. And the touchdowns have come in, and that just might be enough to save him a spot for 2021.
I don't think there's any doubt about him having a spot, but that's okay. That touchdown pass down the middle, that was a thing of beauty, and that's exactly what we've been waiting for in terms of Boykin. They've had more extended pockets this year, and I've heard the argument made that Boykin's speed is mostly long speed, that he takes a long time to build up, and he doesn't have the same ability to cut and make breaks that other receivers do, which limits some of his capabilities in terms of fooling the defensive back. So if you play a little soft as a defensive back, you may have the ability to make up. But then if you become the last line of defense against Miles Boykin, he can do exactly what he did to the Bengals back in this game, just outrun you, and that's where he becomes really dangerous. And when the play has broken down, that's when Boykin's been much more dangerous this year, and last for that matter, in terms of some of the touchdowns he had. He had 3, and 2 of the 3 were on busted plays. The third one was on a designed rub route. And I love to see Jackson taking advantage of Boykin and having a little trust with him. This wasn't a big trust throw; it was wide open. But I love to see him trust Boykin to a greater degree.
Yeah, like you said, it's always on broken down plays is where Boykin has thrived. That's where his red zone touchdown receptions have come from. He had a 13-yard reception for a touchdown, a 15-yard. This one was 43, of course, in the most recent game against the Bengals. But he's always in the red zone, and when things start breaking down, Jackson exits the pocket or he maneuvers his way through it, and he's going to find one of the bigger targets, it feels like, Mark Andrews or Miles Boykin. He's not looking to the smaller receivers or tailbacks as much, and there's been the what I would even say sure-handed receiver in Boykin.
Yeah, I've really liked what he's become, and I hope they'll be a bigger part of the offense. I had him for much more targets this year. We did a little preliminary show. I thought he'd have about 65 targets this year. Didn't happen, but I'm glad to see he's finally getting a bigger role in the offense now. Des Bryant is really, to my way of thinking, has been a character who's kind of underscored what's going on. But we saw this is AJ Green's last professional game. I'm pretty sure he was terrible. 0 for 6 in terms of targets, 2 interceptions, no effort, which was the other bad thing. He's had all these lip reading issues this year about just trade me to who? I mean, who wants AJ Green at this point in his career?
Yeah, and even, as a person that, I very much did not enjoy watching AJ Green for the last, decade has it been now? Just abuse the Baltimore Ravens, with the nickname Raven Killer, as he's been known. I'm not interested in even seeing him in a Baltimore Ravens uniform with the lack of effort that he's demonstrated and the lack of production and what potential is left there. Nothing that we haven't seen in the countless receivers that the Baltimore Ravens have signed, at the twilights of everybody's career. His doesn't look anywhere near as bright as what Bolden's was a long time ago or what Steve Smith Sr.'s was.
Yes.
Heck, even Michael Crabtree looked like he was going to be, when he showed up at the Baltimore, a player of some caliber. Jeremy Maclin as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Wallace, you can name all these guys that, you're like, oh, this guy probably has some upside left. He's got something left in the tank. AJ Green most certainly does not look like that, at least not right now.
Yeah, he had nine yards per target in his career, and he's down to 5 yards per target this year, 5.0, and that's terrible. And I look at Des Bryant, his yards per target's even worse with the Ravens this year. But Des Bryant is trying. He made 2 good blocks in this game. One on a run by Dobbins, one on a run by Jackson, left and right sideline respectively. I like at least his effort. Okay, I think it was a bad decision to bring him in and take a bunch of snaps away from Boykin and Duvernay to basically put him on the field. But at least he's trying. I couldn't stand to have Green doing that with the Ravens right now. And you listen to Twitter, everybody wants a player like Green if he becomes available.
Of course, everybody wants to see the guy that, dominated the Baltimore Ravens for so long to no longer be a threat by just simply having him in their uniform, but he isn't that same guy anymore. I liked the signing of Des Bryant just because, one, I was a fan of Bryant for years and I always wanted him to be in a Ravens uniform, but also because I thought it was a motivating thing for Boykin to see, hey, if you're not going to be up to the task, we'll find a veteran that just came off an Achilles injury who hasn't played in a couple years, just due to the injuries. He's going to show up and he's going to give the effort level, and Harbaugh praised him for his effort in the blocking of one of those touchdowns, I believe, and Des Bryant has shown up and been the cliche phrase that is a consummate professional, is what I've seen from Des Bryant.
Right. I can see that. I just can't see any receiving talent is still there. And I think from that perspective, they should have known it. And, you had to take weapons off the field to put him on the field. I can buy the motivational thing a little bit. The number of snaps he's had in order to get that motivation, that's too high a price.
I think that's fair to say. When I've been approached on what do you think of Des Bryant so far? What have you evaluated from him? I've said he has done nothing more or less significant than the guys they've taken off of the field. So in that regard, I agree with you. The touchdowns he's caught, is that something that he wowed that would have been different than what Miles Boykin could have produced? I don't think so, but I think him being there really sparked this team as hey, we're if we have to go get veterans that need to show up on this team, then we're gonna do it, because this is a year that we have a chance to get to the postseason and maybe make a run. And if you're not gonna put up the effort to do so, we're gonna find somebody that does, and that's what I might believe in him.
Okay, well let's talk about this for the postseason, because the Ravens are strapped for roster spots, and particularly on defense, where they need against the Titans, I believe, to have both 5 cornerbacks active and 5 defensive linemen, which probably means they have to play take an extra offensive player off the field. Is this the week you take Des Bryant off the field?
It depends on whether or not Willie Snead is coming back healthy. That I think is a part of it. Ingram being active, I don't see as a factor coming up here. Maybe even Justice Hill. I know he does some things on special teams that are valuable enough to where he's been finding a role on this offense, on the field and active on game days. But if it comes down to it, maybe Des Bryant is the inactive if that's the way that you have to trend. Because I agree with you that there needs to be DBs on this team because they're losing one per week is what it feels like, and you also need to have those blockers in there. And maybe this could be the week that you take Des Bryant down, but also. He's made a lot of plays in his career, and maybe he's got one left, and that could be the thinking of keeping Des active on there, or that like you're worried that you're going to have to get into a shootout and you're going to need all the receiving talent possible, or you're worried that the Titans could do the same thing and get you down into a hole, and that's going to cause you to react by keeping Des Bryant active on game day so you have another target for Jackson to focus on if things trend south.
All right, fair enough. Josh, how are we doing with the mailbag today?
All right. Well, I believe you guys have pretty much covered everyone on this offense. The real mailbag questions is kind of just actives, inactives, which you've covered some of and kind of just looking forward to how this offense then attacks Tennessee this time.
Okay. Well, how will they attack Tennessee? I think lots of play action. They'll try and use their triple option plays that have been working pretty well, which is usually a counter, a two-man counter, an option to run up the middle, and an option to use speed to the left side when the counter is moving to the right, when the two-man pull is moving to the right. I think those probably are the bread and butter weapons that I go into. Tennessee has very similar stuff. They don't use as much line movement. They do more just pure power blocking with one puller. But we could see a lot of that from them too. And the Ravens are going to need to figure out how to figure out Tannehill in play action just the same way.
Yeah, you got to make that team, the Titans' offense, one-dimensional, and you can't allow them to start hitting you over the top. The problem is that's far easier said than done, because play action is quite a threat when it comes to their running back being Derrick Henry, who posted 2,000 rushing yards this season. And also their wide receiver talents are there. I don't know whether or not Corey Davis is going to spring back into action. He's been struggling these last few weeks, I believe. And A.J. Brown is quite the receiving threat. This is something also that I spoke about in a different show, was that, a lot of people are just, throw Marlon Humphrey on him one-on-one, he's fine, because Marlon Humphrey is great in coverage, and he's tough and strong, and, he's always attributed as the linebacker playing cornerback. Unfortunately, A.J. Brown is like a running back playing wide receiver. Yeah. He's got some tenacious play-making ability in him, and he's big, strong, powerful, and everything that you'd hope for in a wide receiver. So trying to make them one-dimensional is the hope, because I think they have the talent to stop the rushing attack of Derrick Henry. Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams were not in the regular season rematch,
right.
And it was Derek Wolfe's job, and he did a tremendous job, if I remember correctly, bottling up the rushing attack of Henry until an overtime rushing touchdown that occurred. Something I want to take great notice of is the Ravens, after the loss to the Tennessee Titans, did everything in their power to build up for this game. They traded and signed Calais Campbell. They signed Derek Wolfe. They were attempting to sign Michael Brockers at one point. They drafted Broderick Washington and Justin Madubuike. They drafted two linebackers, Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison. These are the guys that when you went, oh man, we can't let Tennessee do this to us again. This is the game that Eric DeCosta and the Baltimore Ravens brass decided, we're going to build a team to combat this kind of opponent. This is the game you got to do it on.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of the offseason will have failed if they don't get this win on Sunday, in some sense.
That's where I've been at.
And it's also noteworthy that Lamar is playing differently since that Tennessee game. He's passed the ball a lot less, pass attempts, and ran the ball a lot more since then. So it's more of Lamar being Lamar, so it's a whole different game.
It makes the passing game much more effective when they're running 2/3 of the time instead of 35% of the time.
Completely agree there.
Sure. Right. All right, get in your questions as we look more ahead, and we've got Know Your Foe coming up. So get in your questions if you have any other questions specifically about the Titans as we get ready for this game for that. Kyle, what's going on over at Baltimore Beatdown that we can plug and get people to go take a look at?
We've just been churning out the traditional content of knowing your enemy. Similar to your know your foe, we do have the behind enemy lines, essentially. We try to contact the weekly opponent, seeing a behind the curtains look from Music City Miracles, which is the Tennessee Titans SB Nation website, and they'll be covering stuff. Spencer Schultz has probably got some film articles on the way. If you want to check out our podcast after you enjoy this lovely show, go to Baltimore Beatdown Podcast wherever you get your Spotify, Apple. We also have been doing, I've been doing Twitch streaming. I've been live streaming post games on twitch.tv/Baltimore Beatdown, talking about the games. And then I do a little bit of fun as well. It's not just about business, it's a little bit of pleasure, and it's playing some video games and hanging out and taking any and all questions, mailbag stuff. Hanging out there. Right now we are playing Backyard Football, which is an adorable old school video game from, I believe, the 90s, early 2000s. So we've been messing around on that as well. My Twitter account is @BB_Kyle P. Barber, and the main show, the flagship Twitter account, is going to be @BMoreBeatdown. All
right. Well, Kyle, we really appreciate having you on. Always a pleasure to talk with you and swap old stories, because you're someone I always look forward to seeing at camp when I was there. Josh, what's going on with 336? Anything new there?
Yeah, it was yesterday. It was Monday, so there was a new episode of 336 recorded yesterday. I don't remember what we talked about, because that's how 336 goes. Is my brother and I talk for an hour and 15, and then I disconnect and forget. I know we talked to Orioles. I know we talked to Ravens, and we always get on topics, so I'm sure we talked other things, non-sports related as well. So that's over at section336.com or wherever you get podcasts as well. All right, and then full week of film study this week.
Yep, full week of film study. So we have the all the normal stuff. I think everybody knows by now we have the offensive pod. The defensive pod comes out first. Know your foe, by the numbers, offensive and defensive articles. And the other thing we're trying to promote more is some of the more gallery work. We got a couple guys now who are doing some gallery work for us. Brent Dawson and Josh Mastiko, who's outstanding. Some of you know him as Organized Chaos 21. Or OC 21, but he has some great visuals that we're going to be adding to the site, and we want to make sure people go out and check those as well. Kyle, I want to thank you again for coming on. Real pleasure to talk to you again.
Ken, yeah, I was really happy to speak with you once more. My schedule was rather hectic this year, senior year here at Colorado State University, and got everything with football, bartending, and of course everything that's going on with this current climate. So I'm happy to finally be on here. I was on winter break, and I enjoy speaking with you. I always looked forward to watching the Ravens training camps together and finding out, picking each other's brains. So I'm happy to be on here with your show, man.
All right, really let's make sure we have you on at least once next year as well. Appreciate having you on, and I'll talk to you next time on Film Study.